In the winter of the year 627, the Persian army marched toward the plains of Mesopotamia, convinced that it would crush a desperate emperor and his exhausted men. 400 years of Sasanian empire weighed upon every one of their lances. But what awaited them in the fog of the great Zab was no fugitive. It was a carefully woven trap, an emperor who had walked 1,500 leagues to corner them, and a battlefield chosen with the coldness of a hunter. Heraclius had learned to bleed the oldest empire in the world, and on that morning, beside the ruins of ancient Nineveh, he had decided that an empire would fall before nightfall. And then, the 12th of December dawned wrapped in mist. The fog devoured the trumpets, devoured the banners, devoured the men. The Persian arrows were lost in the white air. The Byzantine cataphracts plunged into the enemy mass like wedges of iron. Silence turned to thunder. Lances crashed against shields. Horses fell upon horses. Men died without seeing the face of those who killed them. In the heart of that white storm, two emperors searched for one another through the smoke. There was a cry, a Persian name fell on the Greek tongue, and then silence. When the fog finally lifted over the plain of the Zab, 8 hours had passed, and the empire that had ruled from the Tigris to the Indus for 4 centuries lay mortally wounded. A single battle, a single day. And the echo of that morning would cross continents and centuries, announcing the end of one world and the beginning of another. To understand the magnitude of what happened on that plain, one must go back 25 years. In the year 602, the Byzantine Emperor Maurice was assassinated in Constantinople by a usurper named Phocas. That crime was the spark. Khosrow II, King of Kings of Persia, had received protection from Maurice years before and declared war on the Byzantine Empire under the pretext of avenging his benefactor. But behind the pretext lay a far greater ambition. Khosrow dreamed of erasing Rome from the map. He dreamed of restoring the ancient borders of the Achaemenid Empire, those that had existed 1,000 years earlier, when Darius and Xerxes made the Greek world tremble. For 20 years, the Sassanians advanced like an unstoppable tide. They conquered Syria, they conquered Palestine, they conquered Egypt, the granary of the Byzantine Empire. In the year 614, they took Jerusalem, slaughtered tens of thousands of Christians, and carried away with them the most sacred relic of Christianity, the true cross, to the Persian capital of Ctesiphon. All of Anatolia fell beneath their hooves. The Byzantine legions bled year after year, and on the eastern horizon, the banners with the lion and the Persian sun advanced toward the shores of the Bosphorus. In the year 626, the Sassanians reached the unthinkable. Their armies arrived at the Asian shore of the strait, opposite Constantinople. Allied with the Avars and the Slavs from the north, they planned the final assault on the Eternal City. The Theodosian walls found themselves surrounded by enemies on both coasts. If Constantinople fell, Christianity would lose its political heart, and the Roman Empire would cease to exist after 600 years of unbroken history since Augustus. The city resisted by miracle. The walls held. The Byzantine fleet sank the Slavic allies in the Golden Horn. But the empire was on the brink of collapse, and while Constantinople resisted in desperation, one man was doing something that no one in the empire had ever done. He was marching in the opposite direction, toward the heart of the enemy. Heraclius had been born around the year 575, the son of a Byzantine general who governed Roman Africa from Carthage. When Phocas usurped the throne and the war with Persia began, it was the young Heraclius who sailed from northern Africa with a fleet and overthrew the tyrant in Constantinople. In the year 610, he ascended the throne in a besieged city, in a bankrupt empire, in a world that was crumbling. He was 35 years old. They crowned him while the provinces fell one after another. During the first 12 years of his reign, Heraclius seemed destined for failure. He tried to negotiate peace. Khosrow refused. He tried to bribe the Sassanians with gold. Khosrow demanded unconditional surrender. The Persian emperor had gone so far as to send a letter to the Byzantine emperor, calling him a despicable slave, and demanding that he renounce Christianity and prostrate himself before the Sasanian god Ahura Mazda. It was the language of a man who believed himself master of the world. But Heraclius was different from all previous emperors. He was not a palace bureaucrat. He was not a cowardly tyrant. He was a soldier, son of soldiers, raised on the battlefields of northern Africa. And when he understood that no peace was possible, he decided to do the only thing that could save the empire. He decided to fight himself at the head of his men, far from the walls of Constantinople. In the spring of the year 622, Heraclius left the capital at the head of a reduced army. Before departing, he prayed in the church of Hagia Sophia, received the blessing of the patriarch, and promised not to rest until he had recovered the true cross stolen in Jerusalem. He was a slender man, with a golden beard, pale eyes, and a serene gaze. He wore the common armor of a commander, not the imperial purples. When the soldiers saw him riding among them, they spoke for the first time in decades of an emperor who slept with his men, ate with his men, and fought with his men. For 5 years, Heraclius waged a war that no Roman had ever waged. Instead of defending the borders, he ignored them. He marched north toward the Caucasus, toward the mountains of Armenia. There he defeated the Persian armies in a series of brilliant battles. He learned to move quickly, to live off the land, to appear where the Persians did not expect him. Every winter, he withdrew to the mountains. Every spring, he reappeared like a ghost from a different direction. And then, he did something no one had done. He forged an alliance with the Göktürks of the Caucasus, the fearsome riders of the steppes who dominated the heart of Asia. The Turkic Kagan, named Tong Yabgu, sent 40,000 warriors to join Heraclius. The promise was an eternal alliance, sealed with the offer of marriage between the Kagan and the emperor's daughter. But the Turks, men of the steppe, did not endure the Mesopotamian winter. When the first snows of September of the year 627 came, most deserted and returned to their lands. Heraclius was left alone with an army that wavered between 25,000 and 40,000 men, a mixture of Byzantines, Armenians, and faithful mercenaries. Alone, in enemy territory, in the dead of winter, with the Persian army at his heels, any sensible general would have turned back. Heraclius did the opposite. He quickened his pace. He crossed the Zagros mountains. He descended into the Mesopotamian plain, and he marched directly toward the heart of the Sasanian Empire, toward the sacred city of Ctesiphon, toward the palaces where Khosrow counted the gold stolen from Rome. That decision was one of the most audacious gambles in military history. Heraclius knew that the Persians could not allow their capital to be threatened. He knew that Khosrow, locked in his palaces and surrounded by flatterers, had lost touch with reality. And he knew that the best Sassanian generals had died or were scattered on the fronts of Anatolia, Egypt, and Syria. Only one name remained capable of stopping him, a single man, and that man was called Razad. Razad, also known as Rhazates in the Greek sources, was an Armenian noble in the service of Persia. The sources describe him as a sturdy soldier, brave, loyal to the point of fanaticism to the Sasanian dynasty. He was no tactical genius, but he was the last general of confidence remaining to Khosrow. The King of Kings called him to Ctesiphon and handed him an army of approximately 12,000 veteran men with orders to intercept Heraclius before Persian reinforcements could arrive. It was a desperate task. Razad had fewer men than Heraclius. His troops were exhausted after weeks of forced marching. His horses had lost weight because provisions were scarce in a land that the Byzantine army had just plundered. But Razad was a man of honor. He accepted the mission knowing he would probably die, and he set off northward, following the trail of Heraclius along the river Tigris. For weeks, the two armies pursued one another across Mesopotamia. Heraclius advanced first, emptying the fields, taking the grain, burning what he could not carry. Razad followed at a distance, finding every village deserted, every granary empty, every well poisoned. His animals began to die of hunger, his men began to falter. The very landscape, once prosperous, was becoming his enemy. On the 1st of December, Heraclius crossed the great Zab River and camped near the ruins of Nineveh. The ancient capital of the Assyrian Empire had lain there for 1,200 years, its walls reduced to mounds of earth covered with dry grass. It was a place laden with ghosts. There, 1,000 years before, the Assyrian kings had reigned over the known world until Babylonians and Medes had destroyed their power in a single night of fire. The parallel did not escape anyone. Heraclius had chosen that ground deliberately. He wanted the ruins of one fallen empire to witness the end of another. Razad crossed the Zab 3 miles downstream, just in time to see the Byzantine camp on the other side of an open plain. His men were exhausted, his horses hungry. But then news came that changed everything. 3,000 Persian reinforcements were marching toward him from the south. If he waited 2 more days, his army would recover its numerical superiority. Heraclius received the same information almost at the same time, through his scouts. And he understood that he had to act immediately. If the reinforcements arrived, the battle was lost. If he attacked now, on an open plain, with the river fog enveloping the field, he could compensate for the inferiority of his light cavalry against the formidable Persian horse archers. The fog was his ally. So was haste. That night between the 11th and 12th of December, the two armies slept without knowing it would be their last quiet night. In the Byzantine camp, the priests prayed in Greek before icons of the Virgin and of Christ. In the Persian camp, the Zoroastrian Magi kept the sacred fires burning before the altars of Ahura Mazda. 2 religions, 2 visions of the world, 2 empires that had been fighting for 700 years for dominion of the East. The dawn of the 12th of December came wrapped in a dense, thick, almost solid fog. The air was damp and cold. The frozen grass crackled beneath the hooves. The trumpets sounded first on the Persian side. Razad had decided to attack. He understood that he could not allow Heraclius to escape. If he did, the King of Kings would execute him without mercy. Better to die on the battlefield than strangled in a dungeon. He deployed his troops in 3 masses, heavy cavalry in the center, mounted archers on the flanks, infantry behind as a reserve. The classic Sasanian tactic that had worked for 4 centuries. They advanced slowly through the fog, the banners with the lion and the sun barely visible amid the white mists. Heraclius responded with a maneuver that would define history. He ordered his troops to feign retreat. The Byzantine line withdrew westward, slowly, in apparent disorder. Razad believed the enemy was fleeing. He ordered pursuit. The Persian cavalry hurled itself into a gallop, losing formation, charging through the fog, shouting victory before its time. And then it happened. When the Persians reached the center of the plain, where the fog was thickest, Heraclius gave the order. The Byzantine trumpets resounded. The troops that seemed to be fleeing halted, turned, and once again formed a solid line of cataphracts, the formidable armored knights who were the flower of the Roman army of the East. Man and horse covered in chainmail and plates, long lances, round shields painted with crosses. The Byzantine charge struck the Persians like a hammer. The fog cancelled out the advantage of the Sasanian archers. They could not shoot at a target they could barely see. But the cataphracts did not need to see. They advanced in close formation, lance extended, letting the mass of iron and horse crush everything they found in their path. The clash was terrible. Lances broke against shields, horses fell one upon another, men died, trampled before they could draw their swords. The fog filled with cries in Greek, in Persian, in Armenian. The banners were lost in the chaos. The officers lost sight of their troops. The battle fragmented into 1,000 small duels to the death amid the white air. For 8 hours, the two lines held, broke, reformed. The Byzantine chronicles speak of a fierce Persian resistance. The Sassanians were no cowards. 400 years of military tradition weighed on every sword they raised. They fought to exhaustion, but the fog, the accumulated fatigue, the hunger of the previous weeks all conspired against them. In the midst of that storm of iron, something happened that the chronicles would record forever. Rahzad, seeing how his army began to give way, understood that he had only one option left to turn the battle around. He had to kill Heraclius in single combat. If the emperor fell, the Byzantines would flee. If he himself fell, it did not matter. His death was inevitable in any case. He rode forward to the front of the battle and threw down the challenge. His voice cut through the fog. He called the Roman emperor by name. He challenged him to a duel, sword against sword, rider against rider, in the midst of the slaughter. Heraclius accepted. The sources describe it as an act of almost suicidal courage. The emperor of the Byzantine Empire had no obligation to accept a personal duel. His death would mean the fall of Constantinople. But Heraclius knew something that Rahzad had not foreseen. He knew that an emperor who refused a challenge lost the faith of his troops. And he knew that he, after 5 years fighting in the front line, was a better swordsman than any Persian general. The two men rode forward to meet one another. The fog parted for an instant. The troops of both sides fell silent, watching the two commanders ride toward one another as in an ancient poem. The swords gleamed in the pale light. The clash lasted a single instant. Heraclius found the opening. His sword cut the air in a single descending stroke. The head of the Persian general fell upon the frozen mud. A second Persian challenger rode forward. Heraclius struck him down. A third. He too fell. The chronicles say that the emperor received a wound to his lip during one of the combats, a scar he would carry the rest of his life. But the 3 Persian champions lay dead on the reddened snow. And then the Sasanian army broke. It was not an instant collapse. It was a slow, bloody retreat toward the nearby hills. When the Persian trumpet sounded the withdrawal, almost 6,000 men lay dead on the plain of the Zab. The elite of the last Persian army had been annihilated. The Sassanian cataphract cavalry, considered invincible for centuries, was withdrawing in disorder, leaving behind its banners, its tents, its treasures. When the fog finally lifted completely around midday, the plain presented a terrible spectacle. Corpses everywhere, wounded horses neighing among the bodies, banners trampled in the mud, the smell of hot iron, of blood, of the sweat of men who had fought for 8 hours without rest. Heraclius dismounted. He stood upon the field. The blood from his lip fell onto his golden beard. He did not speak for a long time. That same afternoon, the Persian survivors fled south toward the royal palaces. Heraclius did not pursue them. He knew that the true blow had already been struck. He advanced toward the palaces of Dastagerd, the favorite residence of Khosrau, located only a few days' march away. When he arrived, he found the doors open. The King of Kings had fled. In his haste to escape, he had left behind incalculable treasures, sacred manuscripts, jewels, gold, silver, and most importantly for Heraclius, he had left 300 Roman standards captured over decades of war. The Byzantine emperor gathered them one by one. Each one represented a lost legion, an ancient defeat, a humiliation borne for years. That day, as he recovered them, he was not merely picking up flags. he was picking up the honor of Rome. The consequences of Nineveh were immediate and catastrophic for the Sassanians. Khosrow II, who had built his power on the image of invincibility, had lost his last general, his last army, his palaces, and his reputation. The Persian nobility, weary of a king who had led them to ruin, conspired against him. In February of the year 628, just 2 months after Nineveh, the king's own son, Kavad II, led a revolt. Khosrow was captured, locked in a dungeon, and forced to witness the execution of his favorite sons. On the 5th day, they killed him slowly by shooting arrows at him, one by one, until he died of bleeding. The Sasanian Empire never recovered. 400 years of power. Since Ardashir I had founded the dynasty in the year 224, ended in a succession of civil wars. In less than 4 years, 8 different kings occupied the Persian throne. Each was deposed, murdered, or overthrown. The empire bled from within, exhausted by decades of war against Byzantium, unable to defend its borders. Heraclius, meanwhile, returned to Constantinople in triumph. In the year 630, he entered Jerusalem personally bearing the recovered True Cross, returning it to the Holy Sepulchre amid songs of glory. He was the first Roman emperor to set foot in the Holy City in more than 500 years. The Byzantine Empire had recovered all its provinces: Egypt, Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, Anatolia. Everything had returned. For a moment it seemed that Rome had won forever. But destiny has a refined cruelty. While the two empires were bleeding in the last war of antiquity, in the Arabian desert, a new force was being born. In the year 622, the same year in which Heraclius launched his counter-offensive, a merchant named Muhammad had emigrated from Mecca to Medina, founding a new faith. By the time Heraclius celebrated his triumph in Jerusalem, the followers of Muhammad already controlled all of Arabia, and shortly after the death of the Prophet, in the year 632, the Arab armies began to march northward. They found 2 exhausted empires. Byzantium had bled for 26 years. Persia had shattered itself in civil wars. Neither of the two could resist a new enemy, fanatical, motivated by a young faith. In less than 20 years, the Arabs conquered Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and all of Persia. The Sasanian Empire vanished forever in the year 651 with the death of the last king, Yazdegerd III, murdered by a miller while he fled from the Arab conquerors. Byzantium survived, mutilated, taking refuge in Anatolia and the Balkans, where it would resist 8 more centuries before finally falling to the Ottomans in the year 1453. That is why Nineveh is one of the strangest battles in history. It was the victory that destroyed the victor. Heraclius crushed Persia, but in doing so he left his own empire so exhausted that both colossi fell shortly afterward to an enemy neither had seen coming. That foggy morning on the plain of the Zab marked not only the end of the Sasanian Empire, it marked the end of the ancient world. There, where 1,000 years earlier Assyria had fallen, where Darius and Xerxes had reigned, where Alexander had marched, where Rome and Persia had clashed for 7 centuries, there an era ended. When Heraclius rode away from the battlefield with his 300 recovered standards, he did not know that he was burying, alongside the body of Rakhzad, an entire world. The world of Greek emperors and kings of kings. The world of Zoroastrian magi and Christian patriarchs. The world born with Cyrus and dead with Khosrow. The fog of the Zab was a shroud. It covered the dead. It covered an empire. It covered 400 years of history. And when at last it lifted, the sun illuminated a new world, where the sands of the desert would soon bring riders with green banners and a new book in their saddlebags. Heraclius had won the war, but he had lost the century, and history would never forget that on that plain, Beside the ruins of Nineveh, an emperor with a golden beard rode through the fog and struck down with his sword the last warrior of an empire that had endured 400 years. The silence that followed the battle crossed the centuries, and still today, among the buried stones of the ancient Assyrian capital, the wind from the Tigris seems to whisper the echo of that morning. The morning when Persia fell, the morning when the ancient world ended, the morning of Nineveh.